Today what I'm going to share might get me into some trouble, but the truth is more important than the position that we hold.
Some wild stuff happening here today. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Coming out of British Columbia, we've got Pierre Poilievre fighting for Canadians' property rights as it's become in doubt. Who would have thought that? We've got wild stories coming out about sabotaging the Conservative Party in Canada, people stepping down from leadership campaigns. We got a bunch of other stuff here. Let's jump into this. Starting this episode off, Sheree Teese posting this new BC Bagel poll. The Conservatives at 40.7% and the NDP at 38.2%. I can't believe there's so many people in this province that I live that support David Eby, the worst premier in Canadian history. And he's also got this one here, the BC Léger poll, showing 44% for the NDP and 40% for the Conservatives. So once again, this is without a leader. So this should switch around no matter who wins the BC Conservative leadership. Just hopefully it's a Conservative and not a Liberal. We've got BC's first DRIPA consent agreement with Tatlan, maybe the first blueprint for future access fees in our province. 0.08% of BC's population, over 50% of the projected mine revenue. The SK Creek deal splits $1.77 billion to the Tatlan and $1.19 billion to the province. With a $13 billion and climbing deficit, how does BC justify a framework where more than half of the projected mine revenue flows outside provincial tax base? It's absolutely absurd. And this just goes on and on and on. All being flared up essentially by UNDRIP, which was snuck through Parliament. You've got the Cowichan case here.
Well, folks are having a hard time understanding what Aboriginal title means, the breadth and depth of that. But when the Crown has underlying title to their fee simple property, which it does in the province of British Columbia, nobody bats an eye. So I think that we need to start looking at Aboriginal title in a different context, and we need to start thinking about reconciling that title rather than going to the extreme thinking process of displacement and all of the things that can trigger for folks.
I'm sorry, but just because someone's great-grandmother picked blackberries near a river once or spent a couple of nights sleeping by the river, they don't get to own all that land. And I don't care if someone with a lampshade on their head is telling me that. This is absolute nonsense. This stuff does not end. We've got breaking. BC native land claims explode wide open. BC Court of Appeal has ruled that Nutchalant, a First Nation with 180 members, actually has Aboriginal title to more than 200 square kilometers on Nootka Island off of Vancouver Island. What we're looking at here is First Nation is this orange color. And then you've got this recovered title area, which is this yellow color. And then the new map is this one here, where essentially they want all of this. That we're talking billions of dollars of land here. This is prime waterfront land. And granted, there's no roads there for the most part. This is boat access, but still, like, this is premium oceanfront land. If they took this land and divvied it up to 180 members, they'd all be getting $1 million+ of land each. So with all this, David Eby has been seeing his numbers tank in the polls because, well, Canadians don't want to spend 50 years paying off a mortgage and then having someone say that their grandmother was picking blackberries in that area and then they lose their house because we don't know where anything stands anymore. And with that, we've got BC proposes suspending parts of landmark Indigenous rights legislation. So he's going to be pushing this through the House, and this may trigger an election in British Columbia. Convenient, it's in the middle of the BC leadership race. That's how much of a rat this guy is.
When you look across the country, and I sit with all the premiers, and everyone says, what are you doing? We are in an existential moment for this country. What are you doing to help build the economy of this country so we can stand on our own 2 feet? And the other premiers, they list off these massive, publicly funded projects that have to be paid for somehow. And in British Columbia, we're able to say, we are advancing projects that have private sector businesses, Indigenous people, working together that are going to generate billions of dollars.
You notice every single time he talks about prosperity, he always mentions Indigenous people, which is less than 5% of the population. Very weird. You know, you look at this guy's connections to China, and it seems very clear China wants access to our critical minerals. They want to stick it to America. They want to have leverage over America. They want our land. They want our properties. They want things cheaper. This guy's making it cheaper for them. I don't know if that's what's going on, but boy, it sure seems like it.
For the Canadian economy, 10,000 jobs plus that are ready to go. We're able to do that because we're working together.
We're working together, but this guy's rolling out policies that are destroying numerous industries. He calls sunset industries. We have all these critical minerals, forestry, and he's annihilating these industries. He's the worst thing that has ever happened to British Columbia. That's more than enough that I can handle of David Eby, because we've got to move on to this. First Nation leader says Premier Eby's plan to suspend DRIPA will create less certainty because NDP may not be in government 3 years from now. I sure hope not. Now, with everything going on with the BC leadership race, we have this. BC United United, this is the Liberal Party that collapsed under Kevin Falcon, who's the brother-in-law to Caroline Elliott, was secretly behind website calling for Rustad to be fired. Yeah, so BC elections, what are you going to do about it? Is this legal? Should somebody be going to prison for this? We got John Rustad commenting on this, saying BC United secretly funded a fake firerustad.ca website and pamphlets in the final weeks of the 2024 campaign. They lied, pretended it was from disgruntled Conservatives, and actively worked to elect the NDP by sabotaging us while pretending to unite. This dirty trick suppressed turnout when we were just one seat short from forming government. We lost Surrey Guildford by only 22 votes. Yeah, we know what happened with that. There was a bunch of these ballot boxes of votes that went to people's garages, and then they brought them back to count them. What happened in the middle of the night? Did some of those Conservative votes just disappear? Nobody knows. Not to mention people in old folks' homes with dementia were apparently voting. Now their former VP, Caroline Elliott, wants to take over the BC Conservatives, and even Peter Millibar's campaign manager was in the middle of this betrayal. I've been saying it, stay away from these Liberals. Do not vote Caroline Elliott, do not vote Peter Millibar, Ian Black. Don't vote for any of them except for Carrie Lynn Finley. That's it. That's who you vote for if you want a real Conservative. This story is absolutely wild. Coming from the Times columnist, BC United was secretly behind website calling for Rustad to be fired. And this is a real thing. They sabotaged the Conservatives before the last election. Elections BC said the website was set up 2024 to demand the firing of BC Conservative John Rustad. Wasn't the work of disgruntled members as it claimed, but instead created by the orders of the rival BC United Party. The election body has penalized the BC United $4,500 to sabotage the party. That's what the cost is? It should be jail time. It says here for false advertising via the firerustad.ca website. It says the website and a mail out sent to select voters was a part of an ad campaign that was purported to be the work of BC Conservatives, but as we know, it is not. It was the BC United. What's really interesting, it says the letter outlining investigation says BC United was behind the mail out and website under the direction of senior campaign officials with ploy executed by Calgary-based political marketing company Sovereign North Strategies. And if we look further down here, this company, Sovereign North Strategies, is managed by partner Cameron Davies, who heads the separatist Alberta Republican Party. So this guy is sabotaging BC Conservatives? What gives? Or was this just a paid gig and didn't care that he was screwing up prosperity for British Columbians? The election regulator says the mail-out featured a false statement about Teresa Watt, who had defected from BC United to the Conservatives, falsely accusing her of offences under the Foreign Interference and Security Information Act and the Criminal Code of Canada. This is absolutely wild here. It goes on to say BC United did not take any steps to verify allegations in the ad campaign. This is complete sabotage here. There needs to be jail time for this kind of crap. We've got this one. Canadian member of provincial parliament tours First Nation logging yard, which is in the final stages of claiming sovereignty over 1,690 acres of land in BC. And once they get it, they won't have to pay any fees to log BC. Taxpayers are helping a sovereign nation. Yeah, what's the point? EB keeps talking about working with First Nations. The money just goes to the greedy chiefs. There are so many corrupt chiefs who just stuff the money in their own pockets. They impoverish their own citizens, and then they don't have to pay fees. They don't pay the taxes like Canadians do. It's absolutely absurd. This stuff is all wrapped up together. We've got the Reclamaire posting this. A 1988 book was written about Kamloops Residential School. 13 former students were interviewed and shared their experiences. None of them talked about children being ended or buried at the school. Talking about Kamloops, well, we've got Liberal Peter Millibar, who didn't show up to the debate. You can see here, was the mayor of Kamloops for 3 terms. And not only that, on his own Wikipedia page, you tell me if this is a conflict of interest. He emphasizes his background and the fact that his wife and his kids are all Indigenous, and his son-in-law is a Tekalops band member. He also reaffirmed his commitment to pushing back against denialism, recognizing that he would do this knowing his comments would not be welcome in all spaces in his own party. You're telling me that one of the guys running for the BC Conservative leadership has a wife who's First Nations, his kids are First Nations, including his son-in-law who's a member of Tekalops, who's trying to claim the land of Kamloops? This is a direct conflict of interest. This guy can't be the leader of the BC Conservatives, let alone the premier of the province. You just can't make this stuff up. It's just one thing after the other here. Can we not just have some decent people running the country for once? Then we've got stuff like this from the Liberal Party convention. Okay, and at the end of this 3-minute clip, what does he say? He tells a lie about Kamloops.
What happened in Kamloops, British Columbia? 215 kids' spirits resurrected up from the dead. Every child matters. Well, you know what? Every child that grows up to be an adult.
Show us the bodies. There are none. Every lie matters. These guys use this Kamloops story to get money from taxpayers. That's all this is. It's ripping us off. They were given $12 million to dig up the ground and see if there are graves, and they still haven't done it. They pocketed the money and didn't dig. You know what? Taxpayers would do this for free just to prove this nonsense wrong. These guys stole our money and didn't dig. They should be put in jail for this. Moving ahead, we've got Pierre Poilievre bringing up one of the biggest problems, at least in the West, and that's property rights. Coming out with a clear plan here to save Canadians' properties. I've mentioned this multiple times. The Liberals will lose a ton of voters because of this. Who wants to lose their house after spending 40, 50 years paying off their mortgage? This is a smart move to try to do the opposite of what the Liberals do. They fill the media circuit with floor crossing garbage when, say, Francois Philippe Champagne's wife and that whole conflict blows up. So hopefully this does the opposite and clouds out some of the floor crossing nonsense.
One, we want the government to officially reinstate the argument that private property comes first. The Cowichan case is going to the Court of Appeal. The Government of Canada is a party to that appeal. We want Mark Carney to change his legal directive to make it clear that his lawyers must argue that fee simple property ownership, your home and your business, belongs to you and you first, and that no other claim can supersede that ownership. That is not what the current Liberal argument is. This is not a claim that Indigenous peoples have no rights. They do have rights, and those rights should be upheld. At the same time, they must coexist with the rights of homeowners to keep the property that they paid for and they legitimately own. Two, we were calling on the government to commit that no agreements shall be signed with any First Nation without explicit statement that fee simple home ownership and private property come first and cannot be overridden. Any agreement that Canada signs with First Nations must explicitly state this. It cannot be by implication or by non-binding public statements. It must be written in binding legal text. The Musqueam agreement that Mark Carney's Liberals signed fails that test. A future Conservative government makes the commitment today that we will always insist every legal agreement puts your property first and foremost. Three, demand a plan from Prime Minister Carney. Where is he? We have been here now for almost a year where property owners in all of your ridings are wondering whether they own their homes. There are hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions, being canceled or put on hold in investment because Mark Carney has not clarified the situation or the law. He has said and done absolutely nothing. That is not leadership. And that is one of the reasons we have the weakest economy in the G7. We want a plan from Mark Carney's Liberals on how they're going to protect private property in light of the Cowichan ruling and the Musqueam agreement within 30 days. And finally, we want to convene a parliamentary committee to immediately begin an emergency study on what steps, political, legal, and constitutional, that might be necessary in order to protect property right across Canada, but in British Columbia in particular.
There's no way that's going to happen because it almost seems like they're working with China to tank the property value so they can come in and buy up all the important stuff here. There's some sinister stuff going on, and what we really need is exactly everything Pierre just said. Moving ahead, we've got BC Conservative leadership candidate Caroline Elliott's campaign getting annihilated. She didn't show up for the debates, which looks awful, like she's got something to hide, and now her team captain has resigned.
I've resigned as a team captain for Caroline Elliott in the leadership race for the Conservative Party of BC, and today I'm going to give you a peek behind the veil on the campaign team side into what led me to that decision. All of us have to make compromises with these candidates, but we all need to have a line in the sand, and for me, I felt that the compromises that I was making with Caroline led me to a moment where I'd have to compromise my core values of integrity and respect, and that's not something I'm willing to do. And I know full well today that I might be jumping off of the winning team because of the massive amount of money that they've raised and the huge amount of money that they're spending on social media ads, which just might be enough to carry them to a victory.
So there is a very wealthy dragon behind Caroline Elliott, and they're using that money in all sorts of ways to try to win this election. And clearly she can't do it on her stance, on her record, which is why she didn't show up for the debate. It's disgraceful. And now you got her team captain here resigning.
Today what I'm going to share might get me into some trouble, but the truth is more important than the position that we hold. So here's the thing, you guys. The final tipping moment for a lot of us was when Caroline pulled out of the Juno News leadership debate. Behind the scenes, many people had been working on getting an endorsement from Aaron Gunn, who's moderating that debate, and that was completely blown in the decision to pull out. So that was the first thing. And then when we saw the behavior of Nick Kouvalis, her pollster, who went on a tirade on X, slandering Juno News and slandering people left, right, and center, That was a real issue for us, and especially for me. And behind the scenes, in the campaign team chat, a lot of us captains had been saying, hey, you guys, I think this is a mistake. I don't think you're understanding the BC political landscape correctly. This isn't Ontario. You shouldn't be pulling out. Aaron Gunn is somebody that we want on our team. And they didn't listen at all. And instead, Nick went on a tirade and started slandering and swearing at team captains and volunteers. So it was completely...
Yeah, not to mention attacking Juno News, independent news. It doesn't push propaganda against the right in Canada. This is someone who should be an ally, and that Nick guy completely embarrassed himself and the entire team.
Unacceptable. He's never held any accountability for it. He's never asked for any forgiveness, never apologized. He is not someone that I want to be associated in any way or capacity, and neither should Caroline, but she has. So that's where we're at. And you know what? Corey, her campaign manager, he's famous for critiquing Pierre Poilievre in the election for blowing capacity, and neither should Caroline, but she has. So that's where we're at. And you know what? Corey, her campaign manager, he's famous for critiquing Pierre Poilievre in the election for blowing a large lead. He said that Pierre and his campaign team should be guilty of campaign malpractice. Corey, let me be really clear. I think this is your moment where that quote that you gave to Pierre should be used directly on you. This is the moment where I believe you've committed campaign malpractice. You guys went out and gave a public statement saying that there were all these excuses for why you were pulling out of the debate. You said it was because of the dates. You said it was because it was an unsanctioned event. You said it's because Peter Millibar pulled out. Here's the problem. We all know on the campaign team that many, many tickets were purchased by our team knowing all those facts. You knew the dates. You knew that Peter wasn't likely to show up because of his history with Aaron Gunn and Shepard. And you knew that this wasn't a sanctioned event. And that didn't hold you guys back from buying a whole pile of tickets. So that excuse doesn't hold. And then the main one that you've put out now is, oh, well, it's more important for us to focus on selling memberships. So you guys booked a rally in Kelowna, where I'm from, on the same night as the debate. So maybe you'll get 30, 40 memberships tonight, but you could have had thousands in the leadership debate, not only in new memberships, but also in pulling from existing members. I mean, think about it. Peter Millibar wasn't showing to the event. All that she had to do was show up and hold her own, and a lot of those supporters of Millibar would have come right over. And let me be...
Yeah, so I brought this up in my video, that the fact that she says that it's more important to go to Kelowna and have this event where she might get 30 or 40 people that sign up versus going on a televised event to thousands of people. You have to be complete bonehead to be running the campaign like Corey Tenecki is doing right now. This guy is spot on. This is Corey's moment, but I don't think he's going to back down from it.
Be really clear on this. There were compromises that myself and many others had to make with having Caroline as our endorsed leader. And here's the thing. We made compromises primarily out of fear that if Peter Millibar won, that it would crack the party in half, that we would lose the grassroots side and it would completely destroy the party. So we compromised. But those compromises only go so far. When we saw that you guys were willing to compromise on the values of conservatism, like debate and discourse, when we saw that you guys were willing to put forward a complete list of excuses to the public, when we saw that you guys bought out an entire event and then backtracked later, when we saw the behavior of Nick Kouvalis online, you lost the grassroots. You've lost us. There's a lot of rumors that Corey and Nick are out here preparing for a federal run for Jason Kenney. Whether that's true or not is irrelevant. But do I think they're out here getting a list of members and a list of people and meeting really important donors? Absolutely. There are other motivations at play in this campaign. And you guys, I've lost complete confidence in the campaign, and I cannot in good conscience continue to support Caroline Elliott to be the leader of this province.
Wow, this guy's really coming out swinging. So Jason Kenney endorsed Caroline Elliott. That's not the endorsement you want. You want real conservatives endorsing you, not phony balonies like him. And he has been very active on Twitter recently in the past few months, and everyone was speculating, oh, is this guy going to take a run for something? So it's interesting he's bringing this up. Good job on this guy standing on his morals and stepping down from that corrupt team. Do not vote for Caroline Elliott or Peter Millibar. I mean, really, the vote everyone should be doing is for Carrie Lynn Finley. That took guts. Well done. Integrity is everything. Anthony, thanks for laying out the bare truth, a sad, rare thing these days. Thanks for speaking up, man. They're trying to take over the party. They'll say anything to get power. It's the same thing we've been seeing for year after year after year with these liberals. They all do the same thing. They have no honor. That's how they run things. In other news, we have Dragon's Den Dragon Brett Wilson endorsing Caroline Elliott. Does this put one and one together for everyone?
Which of your competitors do you believe would also make great premiers? And conversely, is there a specific candidate or two you believe members should be warned against?
Things about to get spicy in here.
I have got some significant concerns about some of the stances and recent history of some of the other people in this contest. It's very unfortunate they're not here tonight to defend themselves. But I also will tell you this, I'm concerned about some of the people behind the campaigns of some of the folks who aren't here tonight. I'm not going to be told what to do by Toronto. I'm not.
I can agree with that. I have a lot of people who message me, and there's some of the people behind campaigns not running this whole thing in the most honorable way.
What I don't want is our party to be taken over by Liberals. Let's be very clear. BC United not only folded its tent, it set it on fire and then threw it off a cliff. We are the Conservative Party. We need to be led by Conservatives who believe in conservative values and will run a government under conservative values.
Leaders lead by example. Leaders are accountable. Leaders should be able to explain and debate their positions. Leaders should be able to do that with clarity and focus. If you don't show up to a debate, it makes me wonder whether you have those abilities, and there's no way we can know if they're not here to answer as we have been answering tonight. I am proud to stand with these three gentlemen. I think they all have something to offer, and they've been here, showed up. If you don't show up for work, you shouldn't get that job. It's really that simple. I have said from the beginning of my campaign that I thought it was really important that we have a Conservative as leader of the Conservative Party of BC. That should not be an amazing concept in my mind. And we have a couple of people who aren't here tonight who have a lot of explaining to do in terms of past support for SOGI, for DRIPA, for carbon tax, for condemning the Freedom Convoy and other positions they took that are not conservative. I am also, with my colleagues, very concerned that we have Ontario operators here trying to take over BC.
There is serious money being pushed behind certain campaigns. We're talking serious money, just trying to take over the party.
And now David Eby and the NDP today congratulate Caroline Elliott for supporting them on SOGI and safe supply. She said Laurie Thronus's ideas were abhorrent to her. Just today, Eby is praising her in Millibar for not showing up here because they said this debate, we are all extremists. Well, they are the extremists. They are the ideologues, not us.
It's really quite something of David Eby to say anyone but himself is an extremist. The guy wrote a book called How to Sue the Police. That's not a joke. Suing police and private security in small claims court, British Columbia. Zooming in, it's hard to see. You can see David Eby and Emily Ricks. David Eby wrote a book on how to sue the police. This is the guy running British Columbia who's blocking pipelines and prosperity for all Canadians.